Welcome to Redefining Real Estate. I'm Rylan.
And I'm Morgan. Expect a mix of education, humor, and authentic conversation as we explore all things real estate.
Let's jump into today's episode.
All right, on this episode, we are going to be bringing you some market updates for Bryan-College Station as of May 2025. So we're going to be sharing some insights as to what we've experienced most recently within the last month or so, not only from the perspective of having buyers in the market, but also sellers that are looking to list their house as we come across the more active summer season. So, Rylan, I know you mentioned you have a couple of buyers right now that are going through it.
Yes. We are having to push a closing date, unfortunately, for both parties, unfortunately. But yeah, we're having to push a closing date due to some lender issues. This is my first time working with this lender. They're not local, or I don't think they've done much business in this area.
Mm-hmm.
They were already, my client and this lender were already kind of working together whenever I had initially met him. So we had a conversation about the lender. He said no, she's legit. She's got this, all these things, right? And I was like, you know what? I don't know her. I don't have a relationship with her. I've never really heard of her before, but I'm going to, benefit of the doubt. If you're already working with her, that's great. You've already pre-approved, you're ready to go. We put an offer on something pretty fast. I think with only in 2 days of looking at houses. So we didn't really have a whole lot of time to discuss those sort of things, but for the most part, she was on top of everything.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it came to some other things that just didn't really get done out of nowhere towards the end, and now we had a late appraisal, a few contingencies on her side that we can't avoid, and now we are having to change everything kind of at the last minute. We were actually supposed to close today, anyways, I guess the lesson to be learned there is that if you're going to try to move fast on a house or do something on a certain time frame, be sure you're using people that you know and trust. We always preach that with realtors.
Yeah.
I highly recommend that for lenders because if anything, they have more power to kind of disrupt the transaction process than maybe not as great agent or something like that. But
and you mentioned something about moving quickly or timelines. Did y'all have a 30-day closing period?
So we had a 45-day transaction period. We have the closing date is today, so we can have his monthly payment, his first monthly payment due as close to August 1st as we could.
Right, so it's going to skip a month.
Yes,
or two.
yeah. So we're going to prorate that up front and then have the monthly payment as we're shooting for June 2 because that's when it would have been perfect.
Yeah.
But we decided on May 20th, which is today, but he's got a personal trip he's going out of the country for this week, and next week doesn't work because they're going on a big vacation. So we set this date very purposefully, and the seller understood that as well. They had their reasons for going May 20 as well. So all of this is kind of just being turned upside down at the very last second. So very frustrating.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned that it was an even longer closing timeline. So
Exactly.
Usually closing takes from offer to close is around 30 days-ish.
Right,
It can be even sooner depending on if you're pre-approved versus pre-qualified.
Yes.
But I've had the same experience having a longer escrow period with the lender or a bank, because it seems like for a lot of them, they have a checklist, and it's if your closing date is further away than someone else's, even if your file came in first, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They're not actually working on it, and their team isn't working on it until it gets to a certain point before the closing date. Yeah, and so that's very frustrating, and that's why it is ideal to work with someone, your realtor, or someone has personally worked with, and keeping that in mind, because it's if they can't close in 2 weeks for you when you're approved, you should be concerned about 45 days because they should get everything they need up front from you.
Yes, yeah.
It's ideal.
Of course, yeah. And the second my buyer found out, he immediately took responsibility. He's like, was it something that I did? Did I not get her documents, all this stuff? And I was like, no, man, you have reached out to her more than enough times. I've been reaching out to her every other day. Julie, transaction coordinator, been reaching out to her. I truly don't think there's anything we could have done more to give her everything that she needed. Because of course that's our job, is to communicate with the lender, make sure that they are good to go. And she was good to go for 3 weeks straight, and then out of nowhere it's oh, no, we can't do anything. It's crazy you mentioned that because in my brain, I'm like, okay, well, if you have hypothetically 15 more days, you should have more than enough time to do all that. But like you said, like I guess the way they prioritize things is definitely different.
Yes. Yeah. In my situation, we ended up having basically the loan officer had to tell her underwriting department, we're shooting to close early.
Yeah.
And so that way her processor, basically the people in the back, would push the file up to the top of the stack because otherwise it would be at the bottom. And so it's just really annoying because the closing date is set and it's supposed to be on or before that date. And obviously sometimes we choose to try to do it before, but it is unfortunate that y'all were also having communication issues with this particular lender. And so that's the hard part about all of this. Is like you don't really know until you get into it.
Right.
So not to bash lenders in general, there are amazing mortgage professionals out there. And we've worked with a huge variety of them, from regular bank loan officers to actual mortgage lenders.
Of course, yeah.
So that is a really tough situation to be in.
Of course, yeah. And you're always going to have those like fluctuations, you know, especially with like realtors too. You know, you have everyone everywhere, you know, you never know who you're going to get, which is why those relationships are just like so important, and it's why we have certain people that we choose to work with. And yeah, I mean, it's all for situations like this. It's like you mentioned, you may not know until it's like a little too late, you know. So we can't just swap lenders 5 days before closing.
Right.
So it's unfortunate. I am positive we will get this deal across the finish line. Even if I have to drag it. So we will get there. But as far as that buyer is concerned, that was a big hang up for him. Yeah. Well,
I know that you also had some weird situations with like manufactured homes or tiny homes.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like that is really a craze right now. Like people are looking for affordable housing, or maybe they purchased affordable housing and now they're looking to sell. Yes. So I'm definitely curious to hear more about, you know, what all situations have transpired.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's going to be the next thing for like our generation is like tiny home living and stuff like that, because like you mentioned, it is so affordable and you can buy a newer tiny home and be comfortable, you know, and not really spend that much money, you know, compared to like a home. But so I have a listing in Somerville, and it's close to the lake, like on a half-acre lot or something, and there's a tiny home on it, and then like another I guess recreational like shed that they like finished out.
If you guys follow us on social media, either one of us, we both have done videos of that particular property. Yep. Super cool. I would highly recommend going and checking it out, because I think for a lot of people this is like an ideal vacation getaway, or just like secluded, you know, little spot. I agree. Yeah, we had a ton of interest in it. First week, we had an offer, I think, after 10 days on the market, so pretty fast. But it's a finance deal, so they are trying to get a loan on the tiny home and the land itself, as you know, one piece of real estate. Right. However, the tiny home is still technically considered personal property, and it's not on a permanent foundation. So in the appraisal district over there, it's considered real property, like it's on there. So I don't really know when that happened, but it's on there. But technically the two are separate still. I don't know. Apparently when it comes to tiny homes, there's a lot of gray area, because they're under different qualifications than traditional manufactured homes, due to like size, the way that they're transported, those certain things. So I have been trying to figure out what it takes to perfect it as real property and make the foundation permanent, because apparently from everyone that I've spoken to recently, the qualifications for a permanent foundation on a traditional manufactured home and a tiny home are completely different. So I have been working to track all that down. We're still on target for our closing date. However, we let the buyers extend their option period later this week, due to the fact that there's a lot more, I guess, questions to be answered, for lack of a better word. But that's what I've been going through on that. Yeah, well, I know that I had shown that property a few times, and everybody had that same question, or like they just assume like, oh, I can finance this. Right. Because it's a really nice tiny home. When was it built? Like 2021? 21, yes, yeah. So it's not that old. It's in like almost brand new condition. Same with the cottage. And yeah, the financing on these things are very tricky,
Yes.
like you mentioned. So if you guys are looking into doing something similar, whether it's manufactured home or tiny home, definitely make sure you ask your realtor all of these questions, because
Yes.
obviously you as a listing agent, you can only do so much. If you don't
Right.
have the buyer, you can't dictate what lender they are going to use.
Yes.
So, and every lender, as you mentioned, is going to have this kind of gray area where they're going to interpret things differently.
For sure, yeah, and I tried to do as much like due diligence as I could prior to even like listing, just so I could know what financing options we had available to us, so we can kind of target our buyer pool.
Yeah.
But I spoke with people, and then we got a contract, and I spoke with them again, and answers changed. And I was like,
What?
So it was a little frustrating, but I can't be mad, just because everyone is trying to figure out how these tiny homes are going to work moving forward.
Right.
We're kind of like paving the way on this new type of housing. So it's cool to figure it all out, but it's less cool when you're kind of up against the clock to figure it out too. So
Sure, but it sounds like the buyers that y'all have they want to buy, your sellers
Yes.
want to sell, so y'all will work it
for
out.
sure,
whatever
yeah,
needs
yes,
to be
and
done.
yes. I have. I've worked with this agent before. I highly recommend her. She's a great agent. So we've kind of been able to answer some questions separately, and then be like, hey, like this is what I found out today. She said, okay, cool. This is what I heard. So let's try and do this. And so it's nice to have an agent on the other side of the transaction that is involved and as serious as you are about something like this.
Yeah, it sounds like she's a very collaborative agent.
For sure, yeah. She's definitely not like, well, like you should have figured this out, like you tricked us. She's
Yeah.
like, no, like I understand, like let's get this going. So
Yeah.
that is nice. I am definitely grateful for that. But yeah, it's still to be determined. But hopefully we can have some answers today, and we'll keep moving.
Awesome. Well, on that same note, speaking of sellers,
Yes.
I've gone on a handful of listing appointments just over the last 2 weeks or so.
Hey.
Yeah. So, well, we're going into summer, right? So
We
people
are.
are thinking
It is
about
busy.
selling, thinking about moving to other areas. And it's just been very interesting, because I feel like over the last year or so, I mean, typically sellers are wanting to list a bit higher in
Right.
my experience. Like what we call an anticipatory pricing strategy, where you're anticipating a particular number but leaving room for negotiations potentially.
Right.
Like the comps support it, but this is kind of like an idealized number. So I think it's just interesting that this is what our market is looking like. And
Yeah.
from having a couple of buyers just looking out there, I have made an offer, a couple of offers, and we're always offering a bit below asking.
Right.
I'm not saying you should always offer below asking, but I'm just noticing this trend in the market where it seems like sellers are pricing a little high, buyers are coming in a little low.
Yep.
We're able to negotiate and work it out. The only thing that I feel like has been a bit of a wrench thrown into things is things have been sitting on the market for a long time, and then all of a sudden they're getting multiple offers. So if that situation happens to you guys, it's not fake. It's a real, like
It's a real thing.
I did have a buyer that we made an offer on a house that had been on the market over a year. It had gone under contract, fallen back out, and then literally we made an offer and they received another one within 24 hours, and we're supposed to receive a third one within the next day.
Jeez.
We were not able to work things out with that one. I don't know if they were able to negotiate with the other ones or not, but yeah, it's just been that kind of trend is what I've been seeing, is basically the activity is picking up.
Yes.
And sellers are having a certain mindset when they're selling,
Yes.
when they're listing.
Right.
They're willing to do some repairs up front, but typically, at least in my experience, they're not going to repaint the entire house for you. They
Right.
really would prefer to wait and see what happens versus doing more prep work up front.
Yeah, without a doubt. Curious. That one that when it's multiples out of nowhere, whenever you sent your initial offer, did you know all of that? Or was it just like, this thing's been sitting, I'm gonna write my offer to kind of geared towards my client, like, here's our offer. And it's like, oh, by the way, or how did that kind of work
Yeah,
out?
so this particular one, which I have had that situation happen where I submit an offer and then the agent out of nowhere is like, oh, by the way, we have X, Y, and Z. But I have worked with this particular listing agent before, and when we submitted the offer, she had told me they had had a couple of showings.
Okay.
They didn't have anything in hand.
Right.
So we submitted our offer, and it was very much with the idea of like, this has been on the market a while.
Right.
We had copies of portions of copies of inspection reports. You know, we're thinking based on what came back, this is what we're looking at, and also the fact that it's been on the market so long.
Right. It wasn't like you're necessarily writing a super competitive offer up front.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Which,
Okay.
if it had been on the market 100 days, maybe that might have been a little bit different, but it had been on the market over a year, and I want to say almost like a year and a half it had been on the market total.
Yeah, I mean, that tracks, you know.
So for people out there, this is what buyers are thinking when your house has been on the market that long.
Yes.
And so it can be a bit frustrating working with sellers who want to use an anticipatory pricing strategy but aren't willing to lower the price.
Right.
Which is why I always have that conversation when we have the listing appointment of like, okay, we can list at this price, but let's keep an eye on the activity. Let's make sure we're doing what we need to do to get the buyers that are out there right now.
Yeah, yeah. So whenever you offer a bit below asking, let's say they're a little high, you go a little bit below. Have you had an appraisal come back yet on any of those situations? Just out of curiosity.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I just closed one. I had a first-time home buyer in Navasota where they had it listed, I want to say it was like $5,000 to $10,000 more than what we came in at.
Okay.
It had been on the market like 2 or 3 days. We came in at a price point that my buyer was comfortable with. We weren't asking for any seller paid closing cost. It was basically a brand new home. But I had talked to this exact agent about the house next door that she had listed, and I told her about my buyer's situation. It had been like a month after we had seen her other listings. So when we submitted our offer, I came to her and was like, hey, so here's my buyer once again.
Right.
Actually, she really loves this floor plan way more than the one next door that you had.
Okay, yeah.
It's at a price point that's a lot closer to where she needs to be. And we went back and forth on negotiations a few times. You know, we ended up not asking for a home warranty.
Okay.
So put some extra money back in the seller's pocket.
Right.
And then they needed a particular closing timeline that was longer. So we ended up doing whatever they needed. But ultimately, the appraisal came back in, I think, like $1,000 more than what we offered.
Okay, so you're
If that, we were like
yeah.
pretty much right in line. I mean, we're looking in the low 200,000 price range. And it, like I said, it was a relatively new construction neighborhood. So there are a lot of comps in that area already.
Right.
But yeah, I think this other one that I was referring to, it's like on an acre. It had been listed for a long time. There's not a ton of exact comps for it. I think that one may have been a little different. But in general, I mean, I think typically the appraisal is similar to whatever the sales price is rather than where you had it listed at originally. I haven't ever had that I can recall an appraisal that came in, I mean, maybe during COVID, like $5,000 or $10,000 more than what they paid for, but very rare. If maybe one or two, if that. Like I can't even remember.
Gotcha. That's crazy. That's also a good thing too, though.
Yeah.
I was just curious because this deal that I was just mentioning with the whole lender situation, when we did get the appraisal back, so I think we were like $5,000 gap between list price and under contract price, and the appraisal came back like dead in the middle. It was almost crazy. Like they were a little bit off by like I think like $2,500 or $2,500, something like that, like almost to the T.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey.
Interesting.
Because I mean, my comps showed about that number, and I was like, we can go a little bit lower, just kind of negotiate a little bit, and they agreed to our initial offer. So I was like, oh, well, cool. And they're also using like an FHA deal for his kid and all that stuff. But anyways, so I knew we had that contingency, and I didn't want to have to deal with any of that stuff. But it was cool to see like those numbers be super accurate on our end, and then also like see it track with like the appraisers and all that stuff. So it was just cool to see that like they were 2,500 high and we were like 2,500 low, and they came back right in the middle, and I was like, all right, well, call it a wash.
Right.
Yeah, that was a cool experience, and I'm glad it's been kind of the same for you.
Yeah, well, I think with appraisals too, they can be kind of interesting because I think over the last several months or even years, seller paid closing costs has been a much larger portion of offers.
Yes.
As far as like buyers needing that or asking for it with interest rates being where they're at. And so, you may see on Zillow, like some agents will go on Zillow and put how much a house sold for. But it's like, it's not all about the sales price. You also need to look and see how much seller paid closing costs these people were getting, because I was helping another agent at our brokerage prep for a listing appointment in his neighborhood, and it's a new construction neighborhood out in North Bryan, Pleasant Hill, and the listing was for a house that was like 2 or 3 years old. So I was showing him the comps, and I was like, okay, look, when you sit down with the seller, you need to show her the sales price, but you need to scroll down and show her, like, also these buyers got $9,000 in seller paid closing costs.
It's a big deal.
Right, because that number is coming off of their bottom line.
Right.
So if they're not prepared for that, they're going to be pretty upset that they are now getting offers with that kind of information included in it.
Yeah, because I mean, if they're not prepared for that, and you say, hey, like, this guy needs 10 grand coming out of your pocket, they're gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
You know, so like, yeah, I think that's a big deal, especially if the list price is super specific for their like situation. Like, say they have to have this, well, now you gotta like give yourself some buffer because for those situations. Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. How did that go for him? Do you know?
I believe that they ended up rescheduling the appointment to a later date.
Gotcha.
So
cool.
So yeah. Anything else you can think of that you've been dealing with lately, buyers or sellers, that you think would be important?
There's one thing that comes to mind. Whenever we were looking for houses with that buyer that I was mentioning, we went and looked at the house that we're currently in contract for, and the tenant had clearly just moved out. It was pretty obvious. It still kind of smelled like dog just a little bit, you know. It's one of those ones where you're turning on the ceiling fans, open the doors to whenever you show it, all that stuff. But there was some trash in the garage. Just seemed like kids' old toys, like a little playscape thing, just like, you know, just random trash. And whenever we were showing it, I was like, yeah, I'll make sure to have that removed like as soon as possible if we do end up going under contract on this one. We did go under contract on that home, and I think we came back a few days later for inspections, and the entire garage just reeked of like a dead animal, like just something horrible. And that's a super big deal because smells get trapped into the home. So if that were to have gone up into the house and then gotten stuck in there, you know, who knows, right? So that was like first on the list. We've got to do something about that, no matter what. I guess I'm saying all this to say, like, if you're a listing agent, be very mindful of certain smells, or majority of the time trash that's going to be in the garage. A lot of time when people are like moving out, if you're, you know, having a tenant move out, they'll have a lot of trash, not know what to do with it, and then just leave it in the garage.
Yeah, they'll literally put the trash can in the garage. I've seen that so many times.
Yeah, because they're not going to put it on the street, you know, because maybe they don't know if there's a bulk pickup or anything, or maybe they missed it, or whatever it may be. They don't want to put trash in the grass, so I'll just put it in the garage and shut the garage, and then like, good luck, right? So that was horrible, but got it taken care of, got it out of there. Agent apologized because she had no idea, because whenever they listed, tenant was still living in there. But anyways, I guess I just, say all that to say, just be very mindful of those things, because if it smelled like that when we initially went and looked at it, it would have been like a huge pass. But turns out it works perfect for my buyer, but he may have just walked off just due to that one thing.
Yeah, so you're saying you could be causing yourself to lose buyers and or lose money off of your sales price if that situation happens. So just to make sure to she was an out-of-state investor. So I mean, the owner of the property had no idea. Yeah.
Agent probably hadn't been there since the tenant moved out. It was a situation that could have been a lot worse. But thankfully we kind of got it under control sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like, from what we've both talked about, market is starting to pick up. There's more activity with buyers and sellers. Sellers are tending to potentially price a little bit high, maybe leave some room for negotiation. Now, that's not going to be all sellers. Disclaimer, not all sellers. But some, yeah. Some sellers may be experiencing this, and they're interested in seeing how the market, provides feedback. So make sure you are keeping an eye on your property, even if you are out of state or thinking about investing in this area. If you're thinking about buying, there may be smells in homes that you're not, necessarily prepared for. Yeah, it's starting to get hot.
Yeah.
So be aware of all of that. And who you work with matters for a lender and for a realtor. And yeah, I think that pretty much recaps it. So
Yeah.
if you guys have any other questions about the market or thinking about making a move at any point in the future, whether it's here in Bryan-College Station or anywhere, feel free to reach out to us on social media. Our Instagram links will be down below. We would love if you made it all the way to the end of this episode, if you gave us a follow on Instagram and gave us a follow on here. Share this with someone that you think would find value in it, and we will see y'all on the next one.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. We hope you found something useful or at least had a good time listening.
Yeah, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe or share it with someone who might enjoy this content.
And if you have any questions or topics you want us to cover, reach out to us on Instagram. Everything will be linked below for you.